Good evening. Welcome to Messages, Magic, and Musings with Emery Christie on A1R Psychic Radio. Thanks so much for joining me tonight. So tonight I have a special guest. It is my dear friend, Christie of Ophelia Rising. And Christie is a beautiful, beautiful practitioner. She specializes in a number of things, including shadow work facilitation, yoni steam therapy, Ayurvedic coaching, among other things. And so for tonight, what I thought I would like to share with you is some of Christie's wisdom around shadow work and what that is, what the benefit is, what that personal journey of healing is for each of us. As you may know, waking up in a spiritual sense can be a rather uncomfortable practice when we are aware of what it is that we hold that needs to be healed. It puts us in a path of actually having to pay attention to those things and figure out how to do that inner work, how to dig through it, how to do the healing so that we can have the growth. And it certainly can be a rude awakening. There's so many beautiful benefits that come with it. However, it doesn't mean it's not without work. And as I've said many times before, it seems to give a whole new meaning to the term ignorance is bliss. When we don't really know what's hidden in there, we don't really have to do anything with it. But when we have that awareness, we're absolutely challenged to figure out what it is we need and to dig through, our emotional storage, our stockpile of life's events and traumas and emotions that we haven't really truly worked through and have growth through it. So, Christie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you. So I have had the benefit of growing through Christie's practice, actually. So Christie and I know each other quite well. We got to know each other through our work. And Christie is based out of Medicine Hat, Alberta, in southern Alberta, where I keep my main office, my main practice. And I have had firsthand benefit from Christie's shadow work classes. So Christie, would you tell us a little bit about shadow work for anyone who's not really familiar with the term?
Yeah, I would love to. So shadow work is this really intimate process of getting to know yourself and your soul and your deepest truths. And it takes us onto a journey where we find parts of ourselves that maybe we're not too fond of. The parts of ourselves that we like to push away, to not acknowledge that are there. And it helps us to excavate those traits and examine them, become curious about them, and find out where they've come from, what they've originated from, and do the work to heal them so that we maybe can move through patterns of behavior or habits that aren't in our best interest or aren't really serving us very well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I know that it's something that I truly had growth in. If you're a person who's benefited from, psychological services, oftentimes, they refer to things like triggers, right? And so truly the things we would identify as triggers are a lot of what we're addressing through shadow work, right? And finding the real root cause.
Yeah, I think triggers are our best teachers. I think they really are. And so if we're able to receive that gift and examine it and meet it not with judgment, but with love and compassion and curiosity and say, okay, I understand you're here to teach me something and I'm open to learning this lesson. And what we can tend to do is get really judgy with ourselves when we're triggered, and then we can get into a frame of mind where we have a lot of negative self-talk or self-doubt regarding our behavior or the choices that we've made. So learning to meet a trigger as a gift, as a teacher, is a really beautiful way to move into a place of really, truly deep healing.
That's an amazing explanation. Thank you. And it's so it's so important to recognize that there's always something behind that emotional response or that reaction, whatever that triggered response or behavior is. Because as you said, we often go into even judgment of ourselves. And then in that, we often stuff back a lot of our own feelings and experience, which is a betrayal of ourselves, right? So then we take another step back in our healing. If we have that wisdom to be able to look at, where does this come from? What is this connected to? Why did it make me feel this way?
Exactly.
It not only helps us in our own growth, but in our ability to be able to communicate with partners, employers, other people in our life.
Yeah, absolutely.
So can I ask you, in your experience, what do you think some of the most, I guess, focused areas of life people seem to, I guess, need to dig through? What are the common themes, I guess, when people are doing shadow work?
So a lot of things that come up. So I work specifically with women, and so I should clarify that. So my practice is specific to women's health and wellness. And so within my practice, often what I see is patterns of people pleasing or over giving, which
Mhm.
is a tendency, of course, for women, for mothers. And then with that, often feelings of unworthiness or not being enough, right? So
Mhm.
it's like no matter what you do, you're never feeling good enough. You're never accomplishing enough. You're never helping enough. And a lot of that seems to stem from childhood. A
Mhm.
lot of it seems to be inner child stuff.
When I take in that information, I related a lot to that inner child piece as well. And when we think about overgiving and tendency towards people pleasing, often it's either modeled to us or it's groomed. So it's a learned behavior because we learn early on that we need to do X, Y, and Z in order to be
Yeah.
loved, in order to be rewarded with approval. And it just sets us up on an amazing pattern of self-sacrifice, an amazing pattern, which is so amazing when you figure it out, right?
Exactly.
One thing that I notice in clients, when we think about, our masculine energy, our feminine energy, and of course we all have a masculine and a feminine side, is in those that are very much, I suppose we'll say, people pleasers, rescuers, self-sacrificers. They'll often hold a certain energy in their left shoulder and left arm, which is, of course, the female side, right? Yeah. Me too. Lifelong issue
Yeah.
here. But it's such a funny thing. And yes, of course, just like any other stored energy in our bodies, in our auric fields, there's always the potential that things that we stuff down emotionally do end up becoming physical. So it's always such a very obvious thing, in addition to the fact that a lot of us are very empathic, right? So when we sense somebody's discomfort, displeasure, anger, hurt, sadness, whatever, we have a tendency to carry it so deeply that it's almost like we're wearing other people's pain. And in addition to that, when we don't really know what to do with the way we're receiving messages in an empathetic way, we go into often, rescue behavior,
Yeah,
trying to make the pain go away. Because that was
absolutely.
one thing that I never looked at myself as a people pleaser until I was, I don't know, I was probably in my late 30s, and I recognized it and thought, oh my gosh, how did I miss that? But I realized that I was doing a lot of rescue behavior for other people because it made my discomfort go away for a
Yeah.
little while
Yeah.
until it builds up to a point that you're ready to crash, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
that was my experience. So what can you tell us? What do you think the important points of shadow work maybe are, important information for anybody that, is, again, just kind of hearing this for the first time?
Um, the most important thing that I teach, and I teach this in when I teach group classes, it's the very first thing that I touch on is the concept of acceptance. and just understanding that where you are right now is perfect. And there's so many lessons to be learned from your shadow, and being able to accept it and love the process and the history and all the things that come with it is what moves us into a place of being able to heal. So I think acceptance is the most important. And then with that, we develop self-love and self-trust. So once we can accept that, okay, this happened and I'm okay with it, then we start
Mhm.
to trust ourselves a little bit more, because we understand where those patterns of behavior come from. And once we start to trust ourselves a little bit more, then the self-love starts to come along. So it's this kind of beautiful chain reaction that
Mhm.
happens in our healing journey. And it's really amazing to watch. I mean, it's such a gift to be able to see my clients move through this process, and to hear what they say and how their lives have changed through it. It's really amazing. I love it.
I love that. Something that you said at the beginning of that about, accepting that we're kind of at the right place at the right time, I thought was really beautiful. So often I hear people say things like, I just wish I'd known then. I wish that I had done things differently.
Yeah.
I'm kicking myself now. If I could change it, I would. And really punishing themselves for past choices, things that can't possibly be changed. And I can relate to that. I've definitely been there. But I see people feeling like they're late to the game and figuring things out. And again, I can connect to that, but it's always, the understanding that we get to the place that we need to be eventually,
Yeah.
and perhaps it's always in the right time, right? And it's very true. Some people never choose to put those pieces together and challenge themselves to self-growth. And although it can be a painful thing, figuring out how to forgive, it's the very thing in forgiving ourselves that catapults us into being able to be present, right? And to be able to
Exactly.
do the growth. Yeah.
Yeah. I think one thing that's really important is understanding that the choices that we've made and our patterns of behavior and our habits are all related to our feeling of safety. And so everything that we have done have been has been to make us feel safe, right?
Mhm.
So your nervous system has been doing what it's supposed to be doing. And we're not going to change our behavior until the pain that we are presently experiencing is greater than the fear of the change,
I love that.
right?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That's so beautiful. So, can I ask you? This is a topic you and I have spoken on before.
Mhm.
Can you share a little bit about ego? Because, of course, as you say, that we're keeping ourselves safe. Obviously,
Yeah.
that's what ego is. But can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, ego from the perspective of the teachings, and so I've studied Ayurveda and Tantra quite extensively over the last 2 years, and gone through my yoga teacher training as well. So the concept of ego within the teachings is that it's this thing that's meant to protect you, right? So it's meant to keep you safe, and so it shows up in really small ways that we don't really understand as ego in the Western world. In the Western world, if we think of ego, we kind of think of someone that's full of themselves.
Mm.
Um, but within the teachings, the concept of ego comes from this entity that lives in your solar plexus chakra, and that's where it stays and hides out. And it's the thing that keeps you from speaking up in front of a crowd because it wants to keep you safe. It keeps you from asking out the person you have a crush on because it wants to keep you safe,
Huh.
right? So it's that little thing that kind of holds you back, and it convinces you that like your comfort zone is the place to be, and this is where you should stay.
Hmm. Much as you said, very much always thought that ego was that thing that was just inflated and pompous. And, if a person had an
Mhm.
ego, I was not at all drawn to them. And it wasn't really until I started doing a lot of my own spiritual learning and growth that I really, had a greater understanding of ego. But you said something that I've just heard for the first time, that it's connected to the solar plexus chakra.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the first time I've ever heard that. That's very
Yeah, because
interesting.
this is your sense of self, right? And in order
Yeah.
to keep the self safe, the ego starts to come out and to act.
hmm I speak with so many people about ego and safety and that ability to move forward. And when I think about when I kind of took the step into doing the work that I'm doing now, I was so fearful and afraid of judgment. And I describe my kind of leap into what I did as throwing myself off a cliff. And, it's like teetering on the edge for so long, you don't
Yeah,
really get where you need to go, right? And it can literally be that scary, risking putting ourselves in a vulnerable position. It's so understandable how ego keeps us safe. However, it also keeps us in that place of complacency where there's no risk, there's no reward. It's that if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always got. And so
exactly.
it literally can keep us paralyzed while it's keeping us safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's totally true.
Mm. So, can I ask you, and of course, I don't want you to go into anything too personal, but for you, how did your journey into shadow work start? Like, was there anything in particular that kind of drew you to the concept?
So I guess shadow work first started for me actually in my yoga teacher training, which was about 4 years ago. Um, and just because it went really deep. So we went through a journey through each of the chakras and understanding them and how they worked within our own being and within our own life. So that's where it started for me, but I didn't really understand it as shadow work. And I guess probably halfway into my first year of Ayurveda school, where I really started resonating with a lot of the spiritual practices that I was doing is where I really realized I had a lot of stuff, like a
Mm.
lot of stuff, a lot of trauma, a lot of things that needed to be unpacked. And I started to dive in and go through this process kind of on my own, just like treading water, flailing, and figured it out on my own. And yeah, and I found my way with it, and through that I began to be able to receive messages from spirit in a much deeper way. I met you, I took your workshops, I learned a lot about the abilities that I have, and the more shadow work I do, the stronger they get, which is has been phenomenal. Actually, it's been really, really amazing.
That is amazing. It's such a huge dedication to yourself. Eh?
Yeah.
Uh, I'll often say, of course, all of our growth, and whether we're interested in developing psychic senses, whether we're interested in, doing energy healing, or even just receiving the benefits from, or we're just, drawn into meditation and a yoga practice, whatever it is, we're really looking to connect to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all about observance of self when it comes to getting to know who we are and what gifts we have. I will say this though, so many people don't have the same drive as you do to literally carve out time to put yourself in a position where you're doing the work. And that is where I find benefit in being able to make a commitment to a class and to be able to show up. And so, the minute I make a commitment to someone else, I am making a commitment to myself, but it's like I need that to hold me. And I'm sure that a lot of people, find that beneficial, being able to do those check-ins with you. And of
Mhm.
course, I know that I've gained so much wisdom from your reflections when people share and things. So it's
Mhm.
such a beautifully intimate practice, even when it's done in a group.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. It's really interesting, and every class that I lead, I learn more about myself as well. So as much as I'm guiding the process, I'm also revisiting these concepts every time for myself and for my own personal growth. And every time I learn a little bit more, ego gets a little more quiet. I'm able to kind of step out and step more into my truth and into my purpose.
hmm That's beautiful. I find that I always say that people. It's actual people that are the biggest teachers. It's
Mm-hmm.
not so much the workshops and the books and things like that. It is the people. And so whether that's the people you connect with in the workshops or that you share with, or whether it's conversation, or whether it is, somebody that we have the gift of working with on a close personal level, offering services to them and things like that, that's so much where the growth comes from, right? Like being able to put things into practice and connect the dots for ourselves, but to help other people, connect the dots for themselves. It's such an amazing thing because it always brings rewards, but new ways of looking at things.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
definitely.
So I am curious. If you would be willing to share just a little bit of kind of, I guess, some of the highlighted pieces of shadow work as you do workshops, what would the key components be? And because I know that we're a little bit careful about what we share for details, don't
Yeah.
feel like you have to be too
Oh,
explicit.
all right. All right. So we run through. So currently, I have a level 1 and a level 2 shadow work class, and so level 1 we really run through just kind of the foundational parts of getting to know yourself. We talk about triggers. We talk about divination and different ways to receive messages from spirit. We talk about a concept called the 7 mirrors, which comes from the Bhakti tradition, which is a devotional yoga tradition, and how different people offer us different lessons throughout our life. We do some parts work. So we kind of identify the different pieces and parts of ourselves. So, like the defense mechanism personalities that we've kind of developed and how they play a role in our lives. And that's kind of the foundation of the classes. And then from there, we look at the way the patriarchy influences our lives as women is a really big one. That's a class that a lot of my clients are like, whoa,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know.
I definitely took a lot away from that class. There were things that I looked at with a whole new set of eyes,
Yeah.
Different phrases and things that I just had no idea what they were rooted in. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, so that's for sure one of the big ones. And then we kind of move into talking about how your truth and living in your truth can bring you into a life that feels more free. Right, so that's kind of level 1. Level 2, we go deeper. We work a little bit with the goddess Kali. In level 2, we talk about really connecting with the divine feminine, the mother wound, and the divine masculine, the father wound, and working within inner child stuff in that dynamic. And we also go into things like yoni devotions, so specifically for working with feminine energy. And this particularly for me, I work a lot within the realm of womb healing and whatnot. And then we do some stuff like wealth consciousness, because as women, we haven't really had those conversations, and that's something that we need to start talking about. Being able to accumulate wealth, talk about your money, your investments, all those kind of things are really important for women, and that's a big process of stepping into your power. Yeah, I think that's kind of the foundation of most of what we go through within the level 1 and level 2.
Nice. I think it's interesting that focus on wealth, and the idea that women can have money and be having those conversations and focus on that. That's an interesting concept. I suppose when you think about it, it's the idea that men were breadwinners and women were often, without outside income, relying on. So I can understand how that connection is made.
We haven't had our own money for a long time. I mean, it was sometime in the 1970s when women were allowed to like have a mortgage without have a credit card without a man signing on it for you, right? So this is new for us, right? Within the last 3 generations.
Very.
So we haven't had these conversations.
Isn't it amazing to think that it's such a new concept, right? The way that we live, it's such a new thing. One thing that you had mentioned a few minutes ago, we were talking about trauma. And I know that a lot of the work you do really works around trauma focus, trauma healing. And I can say the same for myself. One thing that I think is so important to acknowledge is that traumas aren't always really big earth-shattering experiences that, like a car crash, watching someone die, being attacked. Sometimes we have micro traumas that, we have seemingly smaller experiences that still have huge impact on us. And even we dismiss the impact, the severity of those experiences, how they've really affected us. And so a lot of the time we have so much more trauma to heal and grow from than we realize.
Yes, that is absolutely true. We definitely have, the big T traumas, and then we have the little T traumas. And little T traumas can literally be anything. It can be a snarky comment that your boss or a parent or a spouse made for you. Those things that land in your heart and you don't know why, but you can't shake them. And because of that, a wall goes up, defense mechanisms happen, and trauma.
Yeah.
Right. And that's something that needs to be healed.
Absolutely. And, it's such an amazing thing to know that there are so many ways to heal. So I will leave us with this. I want to thank you so much, Christie, for joining me tonight. It was always lovely to connect with you and to share in your teachings. If you are looking to connect with Christie, she is at Ophelia Rising. You can find her on Facebook. You can find her on Instagram. She also has a website. And if you are looking to connect with me, again, Emery Christie, psychic medium. Thank you so much for joining us.